Set in England in the early 1800s, Jane Austen's Mansfield Park follows sisters, brothers, cousins, and friends as they mature into young adults. In their society, wealth trumps love, need constrains virtue, and social expectations outrank personal desires. When Maria Ward marries Sir Thomas Bertram, her fortunate marriage makes her a baronet, whose influence helps a younger sister marry a respectable clergyman, Mr. Norris. But their youngest sister marries against the family's desires and grows poor as she and her husband, Mr. Price, a former naval officer, have child after child on very little income. When Mrs. Norris suggests Sir Thomas foster one of the Price children, shy, sweet 10-year-old Fanny Price arrives at Mansfield Park to be raised with her cousins. Mansfield Park is beautiful, and the symbol of gardens and wilderness is represented by it. Many young characters in Austen's novels enjoy a daily constitutional, a long walk in a natural environment, for exercise. In Mansfield Park, they walk in the manicured gardens around the estate and later the grounds of Southerton, which include woods and wilds as well as kept gardens. Both natural settings are the scenes for important conversations and encounters, but the young people act differently in the gardens than they do in the wilderness. Gardens stand for order and control, whereas past the gate into the woods, order is at risk. Fanny's pretty cousins, Maria and Julia, snub her, and nasty Mrs. Norris reminds her often of her shortcomings. But her 16-year-old cousin Edmund, the younger Bertram's son, treats Fanny kindly, earning her gratitude and later, her love. This exposition establishes the motif of parents and surrogates. A primary task of parents in Austen's novels is to shepherd young people, children, nieces and nephews, even neighbors, safely and successfully into their careers and marriages. Because a host of conditions, poverty, carelessness, and mixed motivations can influence how parents carry out this responsibility, surrogates often take up the role, with mixed results. In Mansfield Park, the Prices are such ineffective parents that their children would be lost without surrogates. From the scolding Mrs. Norris to the kind and generous Sir Thomas, and even to the lewd admiral that readers never meet, each parent or surrogate shapes the younger character's emerging fortunes. Fanny, her cousins and siblings, and Mary are both blessed and hindered by the adults acting on their behalf over the course of the novel. Tom, the dissolute older Bertram son and heir, wastes much of the family's money with gambling debts that cause Sir Thomas to sell the living at Mansfield, which was to be Edmund's, to Dr. Grant. Sir Thomas then travels to Antigua with Tom to manage his plantations. During his long absence, Mrs. Norris helps Maria and Julia debut in society and arranges a marriage between Maria and James Rushworth, a rich but dreary and boring young heir. Mrs. Grant, the wife of the Reverend Dr. Grant, welcomes her half-siblings, Mary and Henry Crawford, to stay with her at the parsonage. Their lively manners and London sophistication charm the Bertrams. Charismatic Henry flirts openly with both Maria, who's engaged, and Julia, to whom he's less attracted. Mary at first is interested in Tom, who returns from Antigua before his father, but she finds Edmund pleasanter, smarter, and more interested in her. Mary expects to marry a wealthy London man and enjoy London's social life. However, Edmund has chosen a church position in the country, a decision Mary scorns. City and country is a motif represented by this, a contrast in several of Austen's novels. The country is characterized by traditional ways and social mores, whereas city life moves at a faster pace and provides anonymity to cover questionable behavior. In Mansfield Park, London is the setting for inappropriate behavior. But in this novel, the city also invades the country when the Crawfords bring their troubling attitudes and behavior to Mansfield Park, and the Bertrams' quiet, well-ordered household. The narrator clearly favors country ways. Meanwhile, Fanny has fallen in love with Edmund. During Sir Thomas's absence, Tom's friend John Yates visits Mansfield Park, his head full of dreams of acting. Led by Tom, and against Edmund's advice, the young people have a stage built and learn parts for a play, Lover's Vows, which contains risque scenes. Even Edmund is co-opted into acting, driven by a desire to play the lover of Mary's character. Fanny stands steadfastly against the Theatricals, knowing Sir Thomas would disapprove, and his early return ends the questionable activity. Fanny finds herself fleeing the uncomfortable situation by heading to the East Room, one of the key symbols in the novel. First mentioned in chapter 16, the East Room is allotted for Fanny's private use because no one else wants it. Mrs. Norris even stops Fanny from lighting a fire in the room. But its coldness is unimportant to Fanny, as she creates her own warmth within, shutting out Mrs. Norris's meanness, which contrasts with Sir Thomas's warmth. This private space, once the girls' schoolroom, is Fanny's treasured refuge from the demands of her day and the tensions of the family. The room is her nest of comforts, a place most dear because of its associations and contents. Over the course of the novel, when other characters come to the East Room, they come almost as invaders, or at least disturbers of Fanny's peace. Important scenes, such as the impromptu rehearsal for lovers' vows, take place in this symbolic space. Yates leaves Mansfield Park, followed soon by Henry, leaving Maria with a broken heart. She tells her father, who's willing to release her from her engagement to her dim-witted fiancé, that she does want to marry Rushworth, and they marry. Julia accompanies the newlyweds on their honeymoon and remains with them in London, so Fanny and Mary are thrown together, often in the small circle at Mansfield Park. Edmund nearly proposes to Mary during this time, but hesitates, sure she will reject him because of his commitment to the church. He confides in Fanny, who's in love with him. Henry Crawford, returning to Mansfield Park, discovers Fanny's quiet charms and plans to court her, at first for the fun of the conquest, but later because he comes to admire and maybe even love her. When Fanny's brother, William, a midshipman in the Navy, arrives for a visit at Mansfield Park, Sir Thomas and Lady Bertram give a ball in Fanny's honor. The gold chains is a symbol that shows up here. Rarely does the narrator of Mansfield Park focus on what characters wear beyond saying merely, for instance, that Mary is turned out beautifully for Fanny's debut ball. Thus, the narrator's close examinations and careful description of the gold chains take on symbolic weight. The 2 gold necklaces, given as gifts to hold the cross William brought Fanny from his travels, function in 2 ways. First, the chains represent relationships. Fanny's friendship, if you can call it that, with Mary is captured in the pushy gift of her necklace, which is actually a sneak attack on Fanny's determined distancing of herself from Henry. Edmund's gift, on the other hand, is considerately purchased and given, a sign of their true friendship. Yet it quickly becomes co-opted into his own assault on Mary's heart. When Fanny wears both chains to her ball, the symbolism suggests she is caught in the middle of a love triangle of which she is a secret corner. Henry persuades his uncle, an admiral, to arrange a promotion for William, hoping to impress Fanny. Henry then proposes to Fanny for the first time. Remembering his caddish behavior around Maria and Rushworth, Fanny's appalled by Henry's proposal, but torn by gratitude for his assisting William. Both Edmund and Sir Thomas pressure Fanny to marry Henry. Out of loyalty to Maria, Fanny cannot explain her deep-seated objections. Not understanding Fanny's motives, Sir Thomas sends Fanny on an extended visit to her family in Portsmouth, hoping she'll realize the benefits of marriage to a wealthy man, after she spends time with her uncouth family in cramped, squalid quarters. Against Mary's wishes, Edmund takes his vows. Mary goes to stay with friends in London, where her views on marrying a clergyman with a modest income harden, with encouragement from discontented, snobbish friends. Henry appears in Portsmouth to press his suit again, much to Fanny's embarrassment. After Fanny refuses him, again, he returns to London, where he meets Maria at social events and renews their flirtation. Fanny remains in Portsmouth and bonds with her sister Susan. News reaches Fanny in Portsmouth that Tom is very ill and has been brought from London to Mansfield Park to recover. Shortly after, she learns that Maria and Henry have absconded together, infuriating Rushworth, bringing devastating shame to the family and destroying Edmund's hopes of marrying Mary. Edmund brings Fanny and Susan home to Mansfield Park. He's heartbroken over Mary's reaction to Henry's running off with Maria because Mary is merely irked, not shamed. She even thinks Henry and Maria should marry after her divorce from Rushworth, a shocking and disgraceful plan at the time. Julia, too, has shamed the family by eloping with John Yates. In time, Henry and Maria come to loathe each other, but Sir Thomas will not allow his unrepentant daughter to come home. He provides a comfortable house for her and Mrs. Norris far from Mansfield. Julia and Yates seek forgiveness and return to the family fold, while Edmund, recovering from his disappointment over Mary, finds that he loves Fanny. They marry, move into the parsonage after Dr. Grant's departure to London and subsequent death, and live happily together. Readers no doubt picked up on the novel's main themes. Self-discovery is one. Mansfield Park is a romance, but it's also a coming-of-age novel, particularly for Fanny. In the genteel world of Mansfield Park, Fanny must define herself and decide what to value, how to behave, and where to serve in her little world. But as she learns who she is, she learns also who she is not. She is not someone overly concerned with wealth and shows self-awareness in her steadfast refusal to marry a wealthy man she neither loves nor respects, despite the urging of others. Questions of growth occupy other characters too. Tom must figure out what it means to be heir to a wealthy estate. Mariah wrestles with what it means to love and be a wife. Julia struggles to find a model to follow. Edmund, committed to his chosen career in the church, struggles with Mary's rejection of that career, while Mary wavers between the future of wealth she's long expected and the more modest future Edmund can provide. Masks and acts is another key theme. Closely linked to the theme of self-discovery in Mansfield Park is this theme, primarily in the chapters that recount the young people's misadventures in Theatricals. Posturing is part of the marriage game for the younger characters, especially when characters find themselves rivals for someone's attention. Some characters in Mansfield Park, however, never bother with masks. For example, Mr. and Mrs. Price are so rough in their manners that Fanny longs for them to pay attention to the social niceties that mask unpleasantness and make living in close quarters more tolerable. Fanny, too, hides her thoughts and feelings from almost everyone behind a mask of shy docility. How characters can know each other well enough to negotiate relationships is a question because they play to social expectations and hide their real selves. Finally, the theme of marriage and social order in Jane Austen's novels deal with the making of marriages for wealth and love, and Mansfield Park is no exception. But more than future love, fortunes and offspring are at stake. Marriage has a stabilizing effect in this novel. It was a woman's duty to marry as well as she could, both for herself and her family. Lady Bertram did so and helped one sister. The younger sister did not and has suffered for her choice financially and socially. What restores the stability of Mansfield Park is the marriage of Edmund and Fanny.